Nvidia isn't just a company. It's a $5 trillion fault line running beneath the entire global economy, and it's starting to crack. Because here's the part nobody sees. The world's most unstoppable tech empire may be triggering the next global collapse, and the numbers prove it. In just 41 trading days, Nvidia added $1 trillion in value. In the next 79 days, it added another trillion. A rise faster than the GDP growth of Japan, Germany, and the UK combined. But explosive growth like this has only appeared 3 times in history: the railroad bubble of the 1800s, the skyscraper frenzy of the 1920s, the dot-com mania of 2000. Every time, the pattern looked unstoppable, until the cracks suddenly appeared. And behind each boom was the same thing: a hidden machine driving it. A system of factories, energy grids, capital flows, and infrastructure most people never saw. Nvidia sits at the center of the most fragile version ever built. Because the moment that machine slows, even slightly, the entire tech sector, the S&P 500, and every retirement fund tied to it moves with it. That's why Nvidia's meteoric rise isn't a miracle story, it's a warning. And the warning gets louder. In just 18 months, Nvidia created more than $3 trillion in market value, the fastest wealth creation in corporate history, a rise bigger than the GDP of many nations. But that rise is built on a paradox. The most valuable company on Earth depends on a system already breaking. AI data centers draining national power grids, chip factories pushed beyond physical limits, governments warning that energy demand is mathematically unsustainable as data center usage surges toward 1,000 terawatt hours by 2030. And we've seen how systems like this collapse before. History offers the blueprint. In the railroad mania of the 1800s, miles of track doubled, but profits vanished. In the 1920s, skyscrapers rose into the clouds just as credit evaporated. In the dot-com boom of 2000, companies burned billions building fiber networks that never turned profitable. Every time, the expansion looked permanent. Every time, the logic felt inevitable. And every time, the fall came from the same place: a structural blind spot nobody wanted to look at. Nvidia is the next chapter in that same story. Because to understand why this pattern repeats, you have to go back to where Nvidia's story actually began. Long before AI, long before trillion-dollar valuations. In 1993, 3 engineers sat in a small office trying to solve a simple problem. How do you push pixels faster? GPUs were tiny back then. Make games smoother, increase frame rates. Nothing more. No one could have imagined these chips would become the engines of synthetic intelligence or the foundation of a multi-trillion-dollar digital empire. But everything changed the moment AI arrived. Training giant models required power, unthinkable power. Thousands of GPUs running non-stop, burning electricity like miniature stars. And almost overnight, Nvidia's revenue detonated. In 2024, Nvidia generated $61 billion. 1 year later, it crossed $130 billion, doubling in 12 months. Growth so extreme, it broke every semiconductor record ever tracked. In a single quarter, Nvidia's data center division made over $35 billion, accounting for more than 80% of the company's total revenue. They didn't ride the AI wave. They became the wave. But waves always crash, and Nvidia's wave rests on 3 fragile pillars. The first is chips, the second is power, the third is demand. And if any one of them breaks, the entire machine breaks with it. Start with the chips. Nvidia's new Blackwell architecture is the backbone of next-generation AI. Powerful, revolutionary, and terrifyingly expensive, with some enterprise racks costing $300,000 to $400,000 each. But the complexity is hitting physical limits. Moore's law is dead. Transistor scaling no longer doubles performance. Cooling demands are exploding. High-end AI racks can draw 30 to 40 kilowatts each. Chip yields are tightening, and only a handful of companies on Earth, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, can even afford frontier-scale training. That creates a dangerous concentration of power. Because if a competitor launches a cheaper chip, or model efficiency improves faster than hardware demand, or manufacturing hits a snag, Nvidia's margins evaporate. And when your valuation assumes infinite growth, even the slightest slowdown triggers collapse. But chips are only the beginning. Because even if Nvidia could build them forever, there's nothing it can do about the second pillar. The real bottleneck is power. AI data centers consume electricity like small nations. Global data center usage is already around 850 terawatt hours. By 2030, forecasts push that number toward 1,500 terawatt hours, nearly double. Some projections show AI clusters alone consuming almost 1 trillion kilowatt hours per year. In the United States, analysts warn that data center electricity demand could triple by 2028, rising from 4% of the national grid to 12%. And the grid is already straining. States are delaying or rejecting new data center proposals. Utility companies are raising alarms. Regions are experiencing energy scarcity. Nvidia's growth relies on a power infrastructure that can barely support today, let alone tomorrow. But even if we had infinite chips and infinite power, there's still one pillar left. And it's the one almost nobody wants to talk about. Demand. Everyone assumes AI demand will rise forever, that companies will keep spending billions on GPUs to stay competitive. But the numbers don't support that fantasy. Most companies using generative AI are not seeing meaningful financial returns. Pilot projects stall. Integration costs explode. Productivity gains are marginal at best. Executives are spending out of fear, not out of results. And fear has a short shelf life. When budgets tighten, when the economy slows, when experiments get cancelled, GPU orders fall. This is the demand trap. Massive spending now, uncertain revenue later. And Nvidia's valuation assumes the spending never stops. History says otherwise. Because we've seen what happens when infrastructure outruns reality. Railroads overbuilt, skyscrapers overreached, dot-com companies overspent, and then everything snapped. Today's AI build-out is moving just as recklessly. Gigawatt-scale data centers, tens of thousands of GPUs per cluster, billions poured into capacity that may never pay for itself. Consultants now estimate the world may need $7 trillion in new data center investment by 2030 just to keep up. But that number hides a deeper danger. Not the hardware, not the power, the system underneath. The AI compute grid. A global web of chips, power plants, cooling systems, fiber lines, factories, and cloud platforms, all of it expanding in perfect synchrony. Nvidia produces the GPUs. Hyperscalers buy them, power grids feed the hyperscalers, governments regulate the grids, and the entire system only works if every layer keeps growing at the same speed. If the grid can't supply enough power, if chip yields slip, if export controls tighten, if budgets shrink, if model efficiency improves too fast, if a competitor catches up, any one of these breaks the chain. And once the chain breaks, valuations collapse fast. Because Nvidia is no longer a stock, it's a pillar of the financial system. Nvidia has surged beyond $5 trillion, larger than the GDP of most nations. It drives a massive share of the S&P 500's gains. It props up pension funds, index funds, and retirement accounts. If Nvidia stumbles, the tech sector stumbles. The S&P stumbles. Millions of portfolios stumble with it. Nvidia may be the most fragile giant in history, because its success depends on an ecosystem that must grow endlessly, without pause, without friction, without failure. And no ecosystem in history has ever done that. So the real question isn't whether Nvidia is building the future or inflating the next great bubble. The real question is, what happens when the machine underneath finally slows? Because once the hidden system behind Nvidia begins to crack, the leather jacket won't save it, the growth story won't save it, and the markets won't save it. The illusion only works while the machine accelerates. But machines don't accelerate forever. Eventually, they overheat, they slow, they break. And when Nvidia's machine breaks, the shockwave will be global. Stay sharp. The next chapter is already being written.